Hello, this is Gary Auden, and I'm bringing you an EDUcast with CompTIA. Our title today is Voice is Still Critical, IT Needs Telecom Training. Today, I'll be speaking in the beginning of this presentation, and with me is Jeff Ponce, co-chair of CompTIA's Telecom Advisory Council. He's also COO of Day-to-Tell Solutions Incorporated, so he's been in the business a number of years. So let's start off with what we're going to learn today. Most people kind of ignore voice and say, well, that's just there. But I think, and Jeff thinks, this is really a killer application. One of the things we think is important is that a lot of the voice technicians are retiring. Therefore, there are opportunities for young technologists, but they need to learn to be trained in voice technology. Then we'll move into what is convergent and why you better care about it, how telecom fits into the corporate ecosystem, how the world is changing from telecom, from carriers to providers and then eventually to the cloud, and then what CompTIA does in educating people in this field. So let's start off with the killer application idea. You can't avoid talking on the phone. It may be a mobile phone, it may be an IP phone, maybe a legacy phone, but we're still going to have voice. And it turns out, and when you think about it, when you do customer care, customer resource management, voice is still terribly important. I know there are going to be a lot of people saying, well, I could text and do other things. I said, yes, that's true, but it's still there. Secondly, when you think about voice, it's a global technology. It allows me to talk to someone else immediately, and it sets up a real-time communications rather than a delayed communications. So let's talk about the voice techs. I've met a number of them over the years. Many of them have been out there for decades. The industry itself is over 100 years old. Things have not changed a lot when you use a phone. It's been pretty much the same for 20 years. We have a certain set of features we use all the time. But things have changed in the IT department. Telecom used to be separate. Now it's part of IT. And not to be disparaging, but I found a lot of IT organizations underestimate what it takes to deliver good voice. They have different training in IT. They have a different DNA. That's one of the comments that Jeff has made to me earlier. So we start looking at voice communications and say it's not quite the same as data, which we'll talk about in a minute. And so therefore, learning voice as an IT person becomes important. Getting certifications becomes important. And it really is a field that continues to grow. It's not something that's disappearing. On the other hand, most of the telecom staff has aged out of the business. And what we're finding is a lot of IT staff people really don't understand voice and its complications. So let's talk about what the difference is. When you think about voice, it's real time. It needs to work when you need it. One of the things I find with data networks is they are tolerant of delay. Voice is not, and we could say the same thing about video. If you've ever talked on a phone call over a satellite link, which is about 300-400 millisecond delay each direction, you find you end up interrupting people quite a bit. So we need a delay situation which is extremely short. Otherwise, we start having gaps in conversations. You may have noticed that when people do interviews on television, that one person says something and it takes maybe a second or so before the person at a remote location responds. That's the delay on the network. And you'll notice that that person, when they respond, talks quite a period of time. You don't see a dialogue back and forth most of the time. Another point that's real important is sound quality. Now, we have two kinds of quality out there. What you get over the public switch telephone network, which is good quality, but we're moving more and more to what we call high definition. What does high definition mean? It covers the entire range of speech, which helps us understand the speakers at the other end and helps us deal with accents and the like. You've heard the word protocol in the past. It's an information exchange procedure. Well, voice and video have their own protocols, like SIP and RTP and the like. And those protocols are not the same as what you've encountered in the IT world. Next, we move into quality of service. How do we guarantee good quality? And we're trying to deal with quality of service in response to a lot of network impairments. We have packet loss, we have jitter, variations of delay, we have transmission errors, and voice quality of service says those impairments must be low. They don't have to be zero, but they have to be low. And the last thing, which is new for most IT people, is how do we measure voice quality? We have something called mean opinion score, or MOS score. And generally speaking, this runs from 1 to 5. And we're looking for a MOS score of 4 or better. But we can only get a MOS score of 4 or better if the QoS, quality of service, helps us deal with the network impairments. Now, Jeff, I would like to introduce Jeff Ponce and bring up the next question. That is, what is convergence and putting all this on one network, and why should we care?
Yeah, thanks, Gary. I think the first thing we have to tackle is, when you're working with your customers are buying business outcomes. They're not buying technology. And when they look at, for instance, unified communication is not a product. It is what the customer needs to run their business. So when you're working with a CEO of a customer or one of your customers, one of the questions we always ask is how do you want to communicate with your internal customers, your employees? How do you want to communicate with your existing customers? And how do you want to communicate with your hopefully soon-to-be customers, which is part of marketing? That takes a lot of different collaboration stacks, voice being part of that. So those have to be to be able to be integrated together. And so the one thing I'm going to point out to you right now that I've heard from Forrester, Gartner, and all the large houses out there is if you're not an integrator, you better get to know one, because you have to figure out a way how to integrate these different technology stacks together to give that unified communication that the customer is looking for.
Can I ask a question here, Jeff? When you say integration, are you really saying is that when all of the forms of information pass over a network could interfere with each other and voice needs high quality to make it work right?
Yeah, that is correct. And the one thing that something Gary was talking about on the previous slide as far as quality goes. Now, in the past, you had two separate groups. You had the telecommunications group that ran on different technologies than the IT group, and they ran on different networks. They weren't the same. Well, customers are not going to deal with an employer with poor quality voice. They're not going to. And so what it really requires the customer to do is keep their network well-tuned, where they didn't have to do that in the past.
Well, let's move on to how this all fits into the corporate ecosystem. What's important there, Jeff?
Well, in the past, the customer purchased a phone system of one-size-fits-all. And every department had to figure out their best ways to work with it. And the reality is they didn't. All they used the phone for in the day or in the past was to make a phone call and maybe collect voicemails, and that was it. Today's platforms are different. They're software-driven and they're integratable. And so that means the way that human resources uses a phone system in the UC suite would be completely different, or can be completely different than sales and finance and human resources and marketing. And so it allows for expansion of those departments. I think we all hear these days that the new person to go to sell their product to is the line of business managers. And the reason is these cloud applications are integratable. But how is that going to affect how they communicate? The human resources department may want to do personality scoring real time with a potential candidate. Sales is going to want to not only make outbound calls for sales, they want it to be integrated with their CRM. So there's different departments that need the phone for different reasons to create efficiencies.
Now, I've noticed something that's changing, and this brings up a new point. There's a whole series of cloud support organizations providing unified communications within the cloud rather than on-premise. How does this change things?
Well, it changes everything completely. There's two places. One, on the very front end, right? When we go to trade shows now, most of the folks walking the floor are systems integrators. They have learned how to take that hardware and do the best they can to build that inside for the customer's needs. But today's world is completely different. the efficiencies of software creates efficiencies and cost savings. Very quick to implement, actually real-time. The departmental customization, security is evolving because that has always been a big problem on the voice side. The traditional TDMs had folks breaking into their systems and creating large long-distance bills. That doesn't really happen in hosted voice as long as security protocols are being followed. And of course, and lastly on this is the cost savings of using SIP protocols. I don't think there's a hosted voice solution out there that is not SIP enabled already.
Does this actually help me with my staff in the sense that I don't need to know as much about voice when I go to the cloud, or does I still need to know about voice technologies?
Well, it's the customer does not. See, what's really creating efficiencies is we can give the customer better controls over dashboards. But as far as on the IT side, yes, absolutely. Because to a point you had made earlier, the way we use phones still isn't that different. The physical handset has changed. It's not so much what's on our desk. It might be what's on our hand, and what that looks like in the future, we don't know. But how that phone is used to run a business is still the same.
Now, CompTIA is not a seller of anything directly, but they are an educator. How does CompTIA fit into this whole picture for us?
Yeah, about 2 years ago, CompTIA had the vision because convergence was coming so quickly. Remember, they come from the side of supporting the IT industry, and they're the largest IT association in the world. And but they also realized that telecommunications was part of that stack, and so they started the Telecom Advisory Council, and they asked me to be the first co-chair of that group. And what we're trying to do is this is an education process. And telecommunications was completely foreign to the IT industry, and so we're trying to come up with research that shows the IT world why they need to be offering telecommunications, and also give them the confidence and the training that they need to be able to do it confidently. For many years, the IT industry they handed the telecommunications portion of the customer's needs to the carrier because they didn't want to touch it. It was foreign to them, and it was hands off. And there was always a glitch between the two, and there was always and the customer usually wasn't overly satisfied. So what we're trying to do now is really give an education to the IT board how to handle the telecommunications industry, how to treat it like a project, just like they do everything else currently.
I noticed that when I was looking at your website that you had a lot of different training courses available here.
Yeah, CompTIA, from my perspective, is one of the best kept secrets in the industry, and I'm not sure why that is. It's a fairly low cost group to join. It costs you probably half of what you pay on your cable bill annually, but the research and the certification and the classes that you can take at no cost, no additional cost, will skyrocket your career.
So let's talk a little more and finish up about CompTIA.
CompTIA is global. They have very significant groups in Great Britain, all over the United States. They have what they call their annual member meeting coming up in March, and then they have their big trade show, for lack of better terms, called Connect, is ChannelCon, and that will be in the late summer. And it's a place where you can come and meet with the vendors, but meet with the industry leaders and listen to folks that are out there that are agnostic, that are there to help you to grow your industry, your company.
Well, just to finish up, here's some contact information, both for CompTIA and for membership. And I thank you very much, Jeff, for your comments on this EDUcast.
Thank you very much, Gary.